I can't do it.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, this is not a very useful way to prevent yourself from getting COVID, but it is a useful way of signaling something.
You picked these up at the conference, at the Society for Integrative Comparative Biology conference. Is that right?
I did. Yeah,
you did.
Well, so
yep.
I mean,
but you also picked this up, which is awesome. Conference program.
Yes, they gave that to me.
Yeah, and I have begun reading it, and I have some things to share from it. It's actually super awesome in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And then not so awesome in some ways.
So let me just say.
Wait, the pride masks. The pride masks have attracted the cat who has just changed things on my computer by walking across it. He is
nothing if not proud. So let me just say, I was in Austin, of course, for the Joe Rogan Experience, and my hotel turned out to be the epicenter of this conference, which I did not know was going to be there, and it just sort of emerged around me, and I was, was riding the elevators with these people. So this was the Society for Integrative and Comparative Biology, which, that's not a conference I ever attended.
A number of really interesting talks, but there's also the Sexual Diversity and Variation Symposium, which I suspect it was those people who were handing out these pride masks. It did include some talks that appear to be actual science, but it's mostly a smorgasbord of self-indulgent confusion and was co-organized by a graduate student who will no doubt go far, given that he's playing by all the current ideological rules and fashions. But his Twitter profile, and I'm not going to share details or specifics of exactly who he is or what his institution is, so I've taken out the identifying features here. Twitter profile reads, without the identifying features, queer trans evolutionary biologist, aspiring plant, #SciComm, #SciComm, drag king, relentlessly earnest, they, them. This is one of the co-organizers of one of the symposia at one of the biggest biology conferences going on at all, and it happens to be going on right now. Some of the talk titles organized by this they, them, queer trans evolutionary biologist, aspiring plant person are Linnaean Libertines, the queer possibilities of plants, and this one appears to be from the lab of someone who should know better, but the talk is Fluidity and Inconstancy, Australian bush tomatoes, Solanum, as an exemplar of non-normative sex expression in plants and across life.
Non-normative sex expression.
In plants.
Normative.
In tomatoes.
Well, if you're going to have something non-normative in
Australian bush tomatoes.
Right, sure.
Pretty non-normative.
Yeah. As far as plants go in the direction of non-normativity, I would imagine that tomatoes, and especially the Australian bush variety, would be at the top of the list.
It was the low-hanging fruit.
Ooh, that was pretty well done, actually. Yeah, the low-hanging fruit. But all right, so this does
seriously, people. I mean, come on.
This does get to the central question, though. Yeah. My claim is, if you have, I don't know how many people were at this conference. It was hundreds.
It's a big conference.
It's a big conference. If you have all of these people actively involved in academic biology, studiously not making eye contact with the fact that there are symposia that make no sense going on at the conference where they are, abiding by mandates that make little sense at the conference where they are, yes. The field doesn't exist, because the idea is, the whole point of science is that you're supposed to follow the evidence using the hypothetico-deductive method of science to figure out what is actually true, and that is the North Star. Mm-hmm. To the extent that a field is going to kowtow to fiction, right, then it's not a scientific field. And it doesn't matter that it may occasionally do something scientific, because the point is it has signed up for a value system in which something else apparently has priority. And, I don't know anything about this person who organized the symposium, but you can certainly imagine, knowing what we saw in academia, as you say, a person's likely to go far. Why? Because nobody's going to be in a position to say, actually, that work wasn't good enough. That work didn't mean anything. What's more, it wasn't scientific, right? Because if you did say that to somebody who claimed to be trans, then the point is, oh, well, you're discriminating against me because I'm trans. Check and mate.
Check and mate. And also, I mean, he's doing it very effectively now, because just like publish or perish used to be the rule of law in academia, and it's sort of expanded to, well, also you're expected to do outreach, and you're supposed to have all of these different kinds of experiences wherein you engage with the broader community. And so it's not just publishing peer-reviewed academic papers, on which we have talked a lot about the problems there, but that that had been sort of the gold standard. This person has now organized a symposium at one of the largest biological conferences, and previously gave an invited talk at another conference. And those two things on a CV, applying out of grad school for a postdoc, that's huge. Most people don't have that. Most grad students don't have that. So, and yet the topics of both the talk, which I'm not going to spend time on here, and this symposium at this conference are not scientific. There's no science there, as far as I can tell. And no, I wasn't there, and they don't have the talks up yet. They are going to post the talks, and I was going to watch them, but they're not up yet. But it gives the appearance. It's like it's Potemkin science. It's Potemkin academia. It's this facade. And all you have to, the line on the CV is what potential employers, academic employers will be looking for. Like, oh, well, look at you. Aren't you a go-getter? Haven't you done a lot of good work? Like, well, I did do work. Doesn't look like it was good.
No, but it's even worse than that.
Yeah, I'm sure of it.
Well, here's how it's worse. Imagine that your core desire in life was trans activism.
Yeah.
You know what's a real pain in the ass if you're a trans activist? Evolutionary biology, right? So if your core thing was to shut those evolutionary biologists up, right? People who understand that reef fish aren't the invalidation of binary sex, right? You might go get yourself one of them fancy PhDs in evolutionary biology, and you might wield it like a weapon. So I'm expecting that we're going to see this emerge as, and you can imagine, unless the world gets over the idea that as soon as you're trans, you're right. As soon as we get over that idea, we can skip this. But until then, what this means is that as this person is able to set up symposia and give invited talks in order that people can, satisfy their kowtowing obligations or whatever, right? This person is going to gain power, and that power is going to be used for what I call idea laundering, right? Yep. He's going to launder wrong ideas into evolutionary biology, which is going to make it harder and harder to do high quality evolutionary biology because, are you going to cite it? Are you going to ignore it? What do you do, right? And I will point out, I think it's Michel Foucault who essentially argued to Trojan horse fields, to enter them and disrupt their ability to do what they do. Maybe it was Marcuse, but I think it was Foucault. But in any case, it's somebody's idea that the purpose of this stuff is actually its activism and disruption. And so, wake up, evolutionary biologists. There's one headed your way.
Yeah.
Right? And,
it's already inside the house.
Right. The call is now coming from inside the house. And I will just say, this is not to say that trans people shouldn't be able to do evolutionary biology. But if your purpose is to disrupt evolutionary biology with nonsense stuff, right? I mean, the fact is, if you land in evolutionary biology as a trans person, what are the chances that you also land on that as your topic, right? Mm-hmm. In other words, why are you not studying chelation and the scales of a fence lizards or something, right? Why are you studying that exact thing? And does that not suggest that maybe you've landed there because evolutionary biology is not your top priority, but something else is?
Exactly. So I've told this story before, but the line in the bio of the person who co-organized the symposium, queer/trans evolutionary biologist. Whenever I see something modifying evolutionary biologist that isn't like a narrowing of what kind of evolutionary biologist you are.
Yep.
Right? I think to...
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. You know the story I'm going to tell. I think to when I was trying to sell my first book, Antipode. And it was about my research and life in Madagascar. And I had a good agent, and he was pitching it. And this was long before we ever lived in Portland or anywhere in the Pacific Northwest. But actually, there was a small press in Portland that showed the first interest. And I ended up getting it published by a major publishing house, but this small press showed interest. And they were offering, a nice amount of money for a grad student. We hardly made any money at all at that point. And they were super interested because they said, it's a story of feminist science. And I said, nope, can't go there, won't go there, because that's not a thing. And they're like, well, what do you mean? It feels, okay. So, and there's no mention of feminism in the book, but I said, well, as a woman who goes alone in these places, you must be a feminist. And at that point, this would have been late 90s, early aughts. It's like, I actually do. I did still think of myself as a feminist at that point, but that's separate from being a scientist. And you can't modify scientist with feminist, because the feminism is an ideological position, and if that is modifying linguistically scientist, then your science is suspect and your science is flawed, and you aren't holding the scientific process as the thing that is most important. Because if you're doing science and you ask a question that comes up with an answer, that you come up with an answer that you don't like, you're not expecting, you wish weren't true, it's still the answer. And if you are informing your science with some ideology, which is likely to have you push some answers and deep six others, then you're not really doing science. So same thing, queer, trans, evolutionary biologist, like you can be, we've talked no one can define queer, so let's just put queer.
No. Two things. One, it's not the story I thought you were going to tell, but the fact that queer shows up without a meaning in this case, right, is in and of itself an indication that something is up here, right? How is it not redundant with trans?
Yeah. But right? I mean, you could, as you already said, you can be trans and you can be an evolutionary biologist, but putting them together validates the scientist part. Totally
agree, but the fact of putting queer and trans together as a co-modifier, right, that sounds like it's rather full of meaning. What exactly is that meaning?
Yeah.
Right? So I once, long ago, tweeted something like, if the Q were removed from LGBTQ, who exactly would be excluded? And got not a single useful answer.
Right.
So saying, well, then what is this community, right? Yeah. I'm not saying there's no community, but I'm saying, why is there an extra letter in there, if not as some kind of mechanism to do something other than convey meaning, if there's no meaning? But the story I thought you were going to tell was, when we were at Evergreen, there was a hire that was advanced for a feminist economist. Yep. And you and I both raised this exact issue, saying an economist...
Saying no.
An economist is supposed to describe how economics works. And the idea that you've put an ideological modifier on it means that's not what you're doing, right? You've effectively advertised a filter. So it's the same meaning as...
No, and when I argued against that position, because I think both you and I were on sort of the general hiring committee to decide at that point. So we both supposedly had some voice there, but didn't make a difference. I believe I told the story that I just told here then too, because it can't work that way. And everyone is buying the press of the people who are claiming to be the most damaged and hurt by societal strictures, and we just have to stop. We have to stop.
I'm an environmental mathematician. I don't know.
Doesn't mean anything.
No.
Okay.